the longer ending of Mark is one of the two longest. And by the way, I addressed this in the King James only controversy. If you want to have a written version of it, there have been books published. Some of these books where you have different people taking different perspectives and debating one another on it, on the longer ending of Mark that you could look at. But there are two textual variants in the New Testament that are 12 verses in length. Mark 16, 9 through 20, and John chapter 7, verses 53 through 8:11. Those are the only two major textual variants that size in the New Testament. Everything else is just a single verse, single line, phrases, so on and so forth. So that's one of the two major textual variants. Of those two, the longer ending of Mark has significantly better, wider, and earlier attestation than what's called the pericope adulterae, the story of the woman taken in adultery in the book of John. As far as I know, the longer ending of Mark is always found in Mark, whereas the story of the woman taken in adultery is actually found in some manuscripts in Luke and in some manuscripts at different places in the Gospel of John. And so it's a story that was looking for a place to land, and that's one of the greatest evidences against it. And again, much earlier manuscript evidence for the longer ending of Mark. Yet, there are very ancient manuscripts that do not contain the longer ending of Mark. And when you look at it, you discover that there's not just one long ending. When you look at the textual data, in other words, a critical edition of the Greek New Testament, there are numerous textual variants in the longer ending of Mark. And then there's a medium ending of Mark, and then there's even sort of a mixture one, at least one manuscript. And so since you have these different endings, to me, that is the most significant reason why I don't believe that the longer ending of Mark is original, is because if it was, there would have been no reason for the construction of the others. Now, someone might say, well, then there were very, very early manuscripts where for some reason that long ending disappeared. Maybe the manuscript was defective. Maybe the last page fell off. And so all they had was a Gospel of Mark where the last page fell off, which had the longer ending, and so they filled in. The style of the longer ending, the vocabulary, the fact that it has so many variants in it that look like when you have a later edition and there have been problems in the transmission. These are the reasons why I don't believe that the longer ending is original. And notice I haven't said anything yet about the style. Many people have said that the vocabulary and syntax of the longer ending is very different from the rest of the Gospel of Mark. That's frequently a subjective issue, but there have been many people who've pointed that out. And I haven't even touched on the theology. I mean, there's, other than the, drinking of poison and picking up serpents and all the rest of that kind of stuff, that is somewhat strange, to put it mildly. And then you also have Mark 16:12, where you have the phrase ephanerothe and hetera morphe. He appeared to them in a different form as they were on their way to the fields or the country. And that's troubling, to be honest with you, just on a theological perspective and everything else. It looks like the longer ending has been cobbled together from other Gospels and probably from oral teaching or something along those lines. And the reason is, if you end at verse 8, it's sort of like, well, wait a minute, that's not good, because the last two words are ephebunta gar, and you're not supposed to stop with the word gar. So it's like, there's got to be more to it than that. For they were afraid. You don't end your story with them being afraid. Well, some people have suggested that in reality, the reason for that was that the gospel was to end that way so that whoever was presenting it in the early church could present their testimony of encounter with Christ or their testimony to the resurrection. And that's an argument for a very, 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 very early dating for Mark, much earlier than a lot of scholars utilize today, though I think Mark was very, very early. Whether it was the first the Gospels written or not, that's the most popular opinion, but that's another issue. So anyways, having taken a short story and made it long, my fundamental reason for personally not seeing it as original is I don't see why you would have the other forms coming into existence if that longer ending was actually apostolic. I think that it originates in the 2nd century. It's very, very early, but it has some serious problems with it. So it's a different situation than what you have with the pericope adulterae in John. It is much earlier attested, but I still don't think it's original.